Hello everyone out there, you are watching Computer Tech TV and I am Rick Arter. In today's video I just wanted to help some of you guys out. I've been getting a lot of messages on will my computer be good enough for Battlefield 3 or what components should I get for Battlefield 3. Well, I'm not a big gamer, so I'm not exactly sure how accurate this is going to be, but I got the minimum system requirements and the recommended system requirements from a few different sites that I checked out online, and from what I read, I believe this game isn't supposed to be out till October, so things could change, but more than likely this is about going to be what it is. Now I know that these Battlefield games, they are pretty intensive, especially I think they're more CPU bound, if I remember correctly, and like I said, I'm not an expert on gaming by any means, so I'm pretty much going to go kind of by what I've read and what I can put together in my head. So basically I'm going to show you guys the minimum and recommended system requirements, and then I will go through and give you guys my recommendations for what you will need for a computer that should play this new Battlefield 3 game coming out. Okay, I'm just going to go through this real quick, guys, because I'll actually post a link below for the sites where you can see these requirements, but here's the minimum system requirements. If you'd like to pause this, go ahead so you guys can read this better, but here's your minimum system requirements, and here are the recommended system requirements. Now, the few times that I actually do buy a game, I usually will go by the recommended system requirements, because unless you're wanting to run the game at lower than ideal settings or you have a smaller monitor, the recommended systems requirements are basically what you should go by, because the minimum system requirements are basically the bare minimum on what the game will actually play on. So now let's move on, and I will talk to you guys a little bit about my hardware recommendations. Hardware recommendations for this game, as with any game, basically come down to a few things. What monitor size you're running and the resolution of that monitor. Game quality preference or appearance, basically are you a person who just wants to play the game, you don't really care what your anti-alias settings are, what the settings of the game is, you just want to play it. And your budget allowance. Now, budget allowance, that basically means if you're upgrading your computer to meet the specifications of this game, how much money do you have to spend, so you can determine what you're basically going to need, or if you're building a new computer, how much money you have to spend on those components. And that kind of goes back to what monitor you're going to use and what your game quality preferences are, because if you're a person who just wants to play the game and you're more interested in the aspect of the multiplayer or just the campaign mode where you just want to play the game, enjoy it, the gameplay is good, but you're not really worried about maxing all the settings out, and you don't have a huge 24 30-inch monitor, that all comes into play on what hardware you're basically going to need or you're going to upgrade to be able to play this game. Now, me personally, if I'm going to play a game, I want to be able to play at the highest settings, max everything out. I want to make it look really good. So I'm basically going to go over what you would need minimum and what you would need to pretty much max this game out, as far as my knowledge knows here. Now, like I said, I'm not the best with games, so basically going to do what I can, and if for some reason there is something that I'm a little off on, feel free to PM me or put a comment down below so everybody can see, so we can correct this so we can get everybody on the right track here. So now let's move on. I'm going to show you guys pretty much what your minimum and recommended stuff should be for playing Battlefield 3. Before I start on the hardware, I just wanted to touch base on the operating system first off. Now, Windows XP is not supported because it is only a DirectX 9 operating system, and they list Windows Vista and Windows 7 as the operating systems for this game. Now, basically that comes down to you need DirectX 10 or DirectX 11 support. The game will be DirectX 11 as far as I've read. However, I guess it will work with DirectX 10. Now, you want for your minimum, you want to have a 32-bit operating system. That's because the minimum recommendations are 2 gigabytes of memory, and recommended is 64-bit. So if you're building a new system, I would just go with a 64-bit operating system, since almost every place that you buy them, they're exactly the same for the Windows 7, 32-bit or 64-bit. And I would always suggest getting 4 gigabytes of memory if you're going to game on a computer anyway. So definitely look into Windows 7, or if you do have Windows Vista and it's only 32-bit, you'll be able to see almost 4 gigabytes of memory, so you'll still be okay there. But if you are going to go buy a new operating system, I would suggest getting at least Windows 7 Home or Professional 64-bit. Minimum hardware requirements. Okay, this is where it gets a little complicated on my end here, because there's so many different computer systems out there, so many different pieces of hardware that it gets kind of crazy. So basically, let me start here with the CPU. For the CPU, it recommends a Core 2 Duo 2 gigahertz CPU, which is a dual core, as the minimum. Now, they don't list AMD, so I'm not sure. I'm guessing more than likely it's because it will run better on Intel CPUs, but that doesn't mean if you have an AMD CPU, you can't play the game. So, my recommendations here for minimum requirements are Intel E4400 or an E6400. Or for AMD, you have the Athlon X2s and the Phenom X2s. Those are dual cores, and pretty much every single one except for the 2 or 3 of the very low-end Phenom 2s are over 2 gigahertz, so you're good there. And if you overclock your CPU, then you're going to be extra good because you're going to be well over that 2 gigahertz limit. Now, if you are running a older CPU that is a dual core, like a AMD Athlon 64 X2, whatever, I can't remember the name off the top of my head, the older generations of Athlons. If you are above the 2 gigahertz limit, you more than likely should be able to still play this game. Now, like I said, it goes back to what your monitor size, resolution, and preferences are for settings of the game. But like I said, this is just minimum requirements, so I'm going to go as low as I possibly can on this one. System memory, it recommends 2 gigabytes minimum, so you're looking at 2 gigabytes of DDR2 or 2 gigabytes of DDR3. As far as speeds go, pretty much any speed should work. The minimum I would recommend would be like DDR2 667, or for DDR3 1066 or 1366 should get you pretty well on your way. For graphics cards, they recommend at least a 512 megabyte DX10 or DX11 video card. I have a few listed here that I would think would be the minimum that should play the game smoothly. Now, as I said, being the minimum, you're not going to be able to crank the settings up all the way probably, and you're not going to be able to run on like a 2560 by 1600 monitor. But, if you're looking at the minimum specifications, you probably aren't running that kind of hardware. So I would say anything in the 8 series and above from NVIDIA, which is DX10, and anything in the 2000 series and above from ATI, which is DX10 as well, should get you on your way. As far as video card memory, you want the 512 megabytes, and you have GDDR2 and GDDR3. Obviously, GDDR3 is going to be faster, but if you have GDDR2, it should be good as long as you have 512 megabytes. And going back to the overclocking aspect, if you do overclock, you're going to be able to get higher frame rates. So that's one thing to think about. For your hard drive, it recommends 15 gigabytes for the disk version and 10 gigabytes minimum for the digital version. However, with patches and updates and mods and other stuff like that you'll be able to add to the game and that will be coming for the game in the future, I recommend at least the 15 gigabytes minimum of free space. More the better. With 1 terabyte drives going for less than $100 these days, you should have no problem with the 15 gigabytes of free space. Recommended hardware requirements for Battlefield 3. Now this is more for, I would say, the enthusiast side of things, where you want to run a high resolution on your monitor, crank your settings all the way up, make everything look good. For CPU, I would suggest they recommend a quad core. I would say at least a 3 gigahertz or higher quad core. If you overclock, then you're definitely going to be good to go on that. I would say for Intel side, I'd recommend maybe a 2500 or 2600K, and for the AMD side, at least a Phenom 2 X4, one of the higher end ones, or a Phenom 2 X6, like a 1090 or 1100T. They all are going for a little bit lower price now because the new Sandy Bridge E, Ivy Bridge, and the new Bulldozer CPUs are going to be out soon. So depending on when this game is actually released, I would maybe hold off a little while to see how things go with those, and you might want to just go ahead and get one of those new AMD or Intel quad cores or 6 or 8 cores CPUs, depending on whatever they release and what you are looking for as far as your budget goes. For system memory, recommended is 4 gigabytes. I would say at least 4 gigabytes, more the better, obviously. That way, if you are playing the game at really high resolutions and high settings, and you might have something else going in the background, you're not going to get any kind of lag or anything like that. If you are running a system that has a quad core and you're running DDR2 memory still, I recommend at least 800 to 1066 on the speed. And for DDR3 systems, I'd recommend at least 1333. 1600 would be the best, but if you're going to get one of these new AMD or Intel systems, you'd be looking at 1866 to 2000 megahertz, depending on what your budget's going to be. For the video card, this is really going to rely heavily on your resolution and your settings. I know I said that about all the other things, but this is going to be the main thing here, because you can have the best CPU in the world, but if you don't have a graphics card, you're running integrated graphics, or you're running a really low-end graphics card, then you're not going to get anywhere near the high settings or high resolution. So for the video card, they recommend at least a GTX 460 or a HD 6850. Now, if you're one of those people out there who are running multiple monitors, very high resolution, or you just want to make sure there's no chance that you're not going to be able to run this game maxed out, then I would definitely go for a SLI or a Crossfire setup, or get yourself at least a GTX 580 or a AMD 6970 or 6990. And if you have the budget for it, then you can SLI or Crossfire those cards. Now, as far as a game supporting SLI or Crossfire right off the bat, I am not sure of that, but I'm sure if it doesn't, they will either have a patch, or the new NVIDIA or AMD drivers that come out should support that within a matter of weeks after the release of the game. For hard drive space, as I said earlier on the minimum recommended requirements, I would go with at least 15 gigabytes of free space. The more the better. So if you are building a computer now, I would definitely say go out and get yourself one of those 1 terabyte hard drives. They're going for less than $100. Sometimes you can get them for a little over 50, and that's about the best way you can go there. That about wraps it up for my recommendations for what you guys should need for the new Battlefield 3 game. If there's anything that I happen to miss, please feel free to comment below and let me know. And if there's any suggestions you guys would have, please feel free to let everybody know that as well. You guys all have a great day. Thanks a lot for watching. Don't forget to comment, rate this video, and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already.